What does a digital-only church look like, and who is it for? Find out in a minute, because it's time.
Holy nuclear time bombs! Holy overeating! Holy roller coasters!
It's time!
It's time.
It's time for the YM Sidekick Podcast!
Hello, heroes. My name is Tom Pounder, and you are listening to the YM Sidekick Podcast. This is a place where ministers come to learn some cool tips and tricks and ideas on how to do ministry more effectively in this very digital and online world. And today I'm really excited because I've got two people that I'm talking to. One is Jeff Reed. You've heard him before, and he's a great person to talk to about online ministry, which is exactly what we're talking about today. But the other person that we have on the podcast is Angela Craig. And Angela's been doing digital ministry for a really long time as well. In fact, she started the first ever social media church in the Assemblies of God Fellowship. It's called Pursuit Church Live, and she's been doing it for a number of years and is killing it. And so today, the three of us talk about how do you get started in a digital-only church? What does it look like? Who is it targeted to? What are some different factors that you need to be thinking about as you start your digital-only church? But before we get into that, I do want to just highlight, if you've enjoyed the podcast before and love getting it, definitely go to iTunes and subscribe to it, or Spotify and subscribe to it, or you can go to ymsidekick.com. All right, we're ready to get started. Let's hear from Angela and Jeff about starting a digital-only church. All right, with me, I have a tag team of sorts. I've got my friend Jeff Reed with me, who's been on the podcast before, but I have a newcomer to the podcast, Angela Craig, with me, and I'm really excited to talk to her today. I could care less about talking with Jeff today, but just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I'm gonna be the pretty face of the podcast.
Oh, there you
back
go.
And let you and Angela have a conversation.
No, that's great. Well, Jeff kind of connected Angela and I together, and so we're excited to have the three of us talking about digital-only churches today, and what do they look like, and how do you get started? But before we do that, I just want everyone to introduce themselves again. So, Angela, why don't we start with you? Who are you? Where do you live? And what do you do currently?
Angela Craig. I live in Washington State, and I am the founder of Pursuit Church Live, the first digital-only or social media church in the Assembly of God Fellowship. We founded in 2017. And just recently in March of 2021, merged with another digital-only church. So we're at about just over 19,000 people following us, and in 48 countries and 49 languages, although I didn't check this morning. The digital world. I'm married, have two grown boys who are both in college, one that's graduating next week.
Oh, wow. How is that?
Being the mom of two boys that are in college.
Yeah.
Now I have dogs, so keep me company. No, it's great. I'm really proud of them. They're doing awesome. So I love education, so that they could go to college is a big deal.
That's great. Have you always lived out in the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah, born and raised here.
That's great. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. area. So, I mean, you live in one part of Washington, I live in the other, and it's opposite sides of the country. So that's great. Mm-hmm. Well, Angela, thank you for making time to be with us today. Jeff, how about you? Tell me a little bit about you too.
Is Washington, D.C. considered a state yet? Like, I know there was like a movement to make that the 51st state. Has that?
There's always a movement, and depending on who's president, it gets either legs or it doesn't get legs.
Okay, I don't know. Like, I'd have to rewrite all those history books, and that just seems scary to me. Jeff Reed. I live in Miami, Florida, so I am the exact opposite from where Angela is. Married, two kids. I founded theChurch.digital company, blogs, websites, podcasts, all sorts of video streams, just really helping churches figure out this whole digital thing, how to do. I mean, streams are nice, but let's get beyond that. Let's really get towards this idea of creating a disciple, creating multiplication, disciple-making movements. in digital space, and how the church, the physical church, can take advantage of it to be phygital. People make fun of me, phygital. It's okay. It's a word. And then the other part of that is, which I love this topic, honestly, like this idea of a digital only expression of church, a church without walls, without a building, and how we can create a priesthood of all believers via a digital technology, and utilizing these tools in a way to empower people to reach their circle of influence for Christ and to disciple them. Like this is why I wake up in the morning, is to have conversations, and then to have pastors look at me and say, "You're crazy." That's the other half of the equation. It's which fires you. It gets you that doesn't get you fired. It fires you up. It gets you excited to kind of to press on, because God's doing some great things in digital space, and so we, the church, we need to start to acknowledge that, and even join Him in that. So,
Well, I know pastors were calling you crazy before COVID hit, because you've told me stories numerous times about that. But are pastors still calling you crazy now?
oh yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. I mean, well, and it's different. It's like, I mean, and we're talking digital only, so like it's this idea of a digital only expression of church. There's a church, DJ Soto's. I don't know, he's got maybe 1,000 people on multiple continents that are engaging in his virtual reality church. And so, hey, in virtual reality church, we're going to do a baptism service. So we're going to baptize avatars. So yeah, we're going to let people get baptized using their avatar form. And by the way, DJ was actually globally represented because he was baptizing people in virtual reality space. BBC over in England did a story on him.
Wow.
Fox News, CNN picked it up. The Daily Show did a shtick on the guy who's baptizing people in virtual reality. And so like that, and I, sometimes, honestly, sometimes I just like to poke the bear. I know it's funny.
Yes,
And
you
so
do.
you have that conversation with the pastor, and yeah, you know what's going to happen? Yo, you can't baptize people in virtual reality. There's no actual water molecules that are touching. And so, look, listen, baptism, it's a symbol. You're doing it in front of people. You're declaring a witness. Yeah, okay, virtual reality baptisms may be a little weird. Will I get before God one day and say, hey, what do you really think of this? I would love that answer.
Yeah.
But looking at the tools that are available, I'm seeing a life change happen, and that symbol being done publicly in front of witnesses, even if no water is actually touching the skin. And so rather than to quibble over whether it's good or not, let's celebrate it and let's move on towards other things like disciple making that are often lost in the church to even start with.
That is awesome. And that this little will segue into kind of my first question with Angela here. Angela, I want to ask you, you started this digital only church. So what caused you to start this? And then we'll get into the biblical basis of it. So talk to me a little bit about that as you were starting your own.
That is a good question. For 10 years before I founded Pursuit, I was the director for women at the Northwest Ministry Network, and we were resourcing and strengthening and developing leaders of the 340 churches, AG churches in Washington and Idaho. And so the biggest question pastors were asking at the time was, how do we get people to come to church? We all know that. That's still a question we're asking. Inside our organization, the learning organization, because we did a lot of training events, a lot of leader development, we were asking, how do we get people to come to events? So kind of the same thing. People want to come, but there was so many barriers that were in their way, money or time or schedules. And so I started doing Facebook groups. And these were specifically, I started them for the 340 churches, for women to gather online and to be equipped to reach their communities for Jesus. So here's the surprising thing, is that we had 500 people within 6 months, and 40% of those women were not going to one of our 340 churches. In fact, 40% of those women were not attached to a church at all. So they found us because we were saying, find your purpose in Christ. And they wanted to know Jesus, and they wanted to know how to serve him. And so I had always had a heart for everybody outside the walls of the church. And it was a big frustration for me. I just had no idea how to reach them. And here God drops this in my lap of, here's a way. So I went to our superintendent and said, I want to start a social media church. I don't even know what that looks like, but I want to try. And he said, that will never get approved. But
Within the denomination, right? It won't get approved within.
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, within the national office. Yeah. But if God is calling you to do it, you have to do it. And you don't need man's approval. You just need God's approval, and you already have that. So I started just really experimenting with digital. We tried every platform. We tried, well, probably not every platform, but most every platform. We tried having an app. We tried streaming to a website. We tried streaming to Facebook. And we ended up landing on Facebook because that's where all of our people were coming from. And it was a free platform. And now there's 3.6 or 8 billion people coming to Facebook every month, plenty of people to minister to. And people are there to be seen and to be heard, and they want a witness to their soul. And I knew God was calling me to that. And so in the first year, we had 7,000 people, 27 salvations, and 32 baptisms.
Wow.
And so the national office did approve us as the first social media church, and that's how we got started.
That's awesome. Why did they say that the denomination would never approve you? Like, did they have a reason? This kind of goes into our biblical basis,
right? Here. Yes, because from the outside, if we're looking at it through our own lens of what social media is, we're posting pictures for our family, we're sharing events. There's not a meeting of a group, a body of people. There is in a wider sense, but it's not what we know as church. And so we know church as you come to a building, you listen to a pastor, and you might be in a small group, and you tithe, and hopefully we can get you to serve in your community. So I think that our ecclesiology of church has been really formed by our experiences. So you look at digital and the good and the bad of it, and you think, ooh, no, that's not church. How could you ever connect someone on social media? What I found was something completely opposite and surprising, was that people were connecting faster because they're meeting together daily. There's that ability to be vulnerable because you have a lot of space. Like, you think about being a person who has to walk through the churches of a door, and you don't know anybody, and everybody else knows everyone, and how hard that is for someone to physically walk through the doors of a church. And so this is a way where people can explore faith and purpose in a community without that fear of being rejected. And I think it's a real thing. And then our whole goal was to get people plugged into in-person community, after they realized we're not weird and we love them. And that actually has really, the people that God has called us to serve are those that don't have a spiritual home, can't go to church, or won't go to church. And so we have more than enough people to serve in that category right now. But the goal was to get them in person.
That's awesome. Jeff, I sense you have something to say here.
Of course. Listen, if a digital church serves as that front door to getting people connected to Christ and restoring them to the place where they join a physical community, awesome. Like, embrace that and run with that. That's a phenomenal strategy. And I love that Angela's been doing that with her church and setting that up. Let's get them engaged in regular readings of the Word. Let's get them connected into a small group. Let's get them teaching. Let's get them maybe even at a micro location or something like that. I do think there's a role of physical, and even as you're doing digital only, there's this. Hey, maybe there is like an ecclesia part where there is some sort of a physical gathering or something like that, or maybe it's even a challenge in our own life to try to create something new. But then we also need to recognize, like, in Iran right now, the I mean, literally I had a converted Muslim pastor tell me. I was talking about all this digital stuff, and I'm really excited, as you can tell, talking digital. And so I had this Muslim pastor tell me. I was telling him all the digital only stories we're seeing, and he kind of honestly he got a little annoyed at me. It's cool, and he says to me, "Hey Jeff, you know who's really good at digital church? Who's really like leading the way in digital church?" I said, "No, who? I'd love to meet him. I'd love to talk to him. Let me learn from him." And he says, literally every pastor in Iran.
Mhm.
Anybody who's a pastor in Iran is excellent at digital church because that's all they have. They don't have the option of gathering physically. I've actually talked with an American in Iran. For 20 minutes, the dude wouldn't turn his webcam on because he didn't trust me enough to actually show me his picture. And then he told me stories of all the people in Iran that wanted him dead. Because he was an American, because he was a pastor, because he was training other pastors on how to do church in digital space. So,
Mhm.
yeah, you don't need the physical, or at least if you do need the physical, now we're invalidating a lot of what Iran's doing because for the majority of Iran church, it's all centered around broadcasts which connect with individuals and championing this idea of a single Christian in a home witnessing and sharing with the individual family. That's what the church is. The church
Mhm.
is literally the house where that one Christian is now trying to witness to the rest of the house. And
Mhm.
so church can look different. And I think
Mhm.
that's the lesson that we're learning from Angela. It's, man, all these different things are not what we would typically see in a Western church. That doesn't make it wrong, and it doesn't make it bad.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a few things you
absolutely.
guys both said that I thought was interesting. Again, about the front door thing. I remember early on when we were launched our campus, our online campus for New Life, is people were a little nervous. They're like, it's going to take away people from the in-person gathering. You're going to
Mhm.
take away people, and we're like, no, it's not going to take away people. We're hoping it's being used to introduce people more to our church, and that they would
Mhm.
want to come in person, and that they'd want to connect. Again, we were,
Mhm.
this isn't new for you all. You guys know this, but people are looking at your websites first. They're looking at
Mhm.
your social media first, and if they see a church service, they're going to probably watch it online first before they come in person, because there is that barrier. I think Angela said there's a little barrier about coming into the church front door. So if
Mhm.
this is an option for them to experience Christ and experience community and sing worship, I think that's a very valid thing to do.
Mhm.
But I also think now, in this time of COVID, and as we're coming out of it and more churches are reopening, um, I think less and less people are coming back in person. I still
Mhm.
think they're going to experience church, but it's going to be these digital only churches that I think they might latch on to. What are you all seeing about church attendance and the proliferation of digital only churches?
Mhm. I want to answer that with some Barna research, but first I do want to say, tagging on to what you and Jeff are both talking about, is I don't usually fight critics, but I will fight them if they tell me that our church is not community, because the people in our church are so incredibly close. And closer, I can say I'm closer to the people in my digital church than I ever was to people in person, because there was always kind of this comparison, or who you had to be as the pastor, and there was very little vulnerability in the church, which vulnerability leads to transformation. And so I think that our churches today, yes, have the purpose of having people translate into your in-person gatherings, or starting ones where they're at, or being the person in their home that is Jesus to everybody. But I think where our churches right now are lacking is that they're not ready to serve people online. They're not ready to discipleship every day online. They're not ready to love people every day, to pray with them, to help resource them online. And so I think that's something that we have to really, really look at. And now that I said all that, I forgot your question.
Well, you're gonna quote me some Barna research about.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
So the 2020 Barna research on the state of the church said that only 25% of Americans would call themselves practicing Christians. So that means there's 75% of the just America. We're not talking like Pursuit Church Live is half of our church is not in the United States. So that's, digital reach to every corner of the world is, you have to have that mindset, or you could decide to have that mindset, I guess. So really, if we look at that, who is serving those 75%? And I think with COVID, yes, we are seeing, and Jeff probably has stats on this, I think only 35% or something of people are returning to in person. But when you find another way of discipleship, so you're, I'm going to go for a run after this and I'm going to listen to someone's church message, or I'm going to talk to my small group on the Marco Polo app, because that's the way that now we've had this amazing gift of technology to help us. But if we don't utilize those things, no, people are going to flail. So we have to be kind of inventive and creative in bringing people Jesus, not the way we think it should be, but the way they need it to be.
Yeah. But
I would agree with all that. I think that if we, the church, are broken, and if we stay broken, we stay humble, I think there's an opportunity for us to reach a different type of person and to re-engage. But I think when COVID sped us up, culture was already changing. We were already heading in this direction. COVID just sped up culture 3 to 7 years. And so the road, which is, we felt that pain point, it was like, oh my gosh, there's this politics thing and this race thing. And it's like week to week to week. It's because literally COVID is speeding up the virtual VCR machine of life. And we're seeing this stuff fast forwarded. And as a reality coming out of this, the value of the church, the value of the organization has never meant as little as it does today, at least in modern history. And this is where we need new models of church. We need new expressions of church. The mega giga multi, the large church is not the only way to reach people. And it's frustrating where even the church plants and the people that are starting out, they have these dreams and these aspirations of reaching as many people as possible within their organization. I had a friend of mine tell me, Jeff, it's the goal of every church to grow, not to grow as big as possible, but to grow big enough to multiply, to create, to do something new, and then grow again. Grow up to the point where you can multiply and release out. And so it's not these mega giga giant things as much as it is to multiply. Several years ago, and Tom, I think I told you this story. I right when I'd stepped out of a mega giga multi-site church, and I'll be honest, like my worldview, and I think it was like 2018, and so it's crazy to say, within 3 years, my worldview has completely shifted. And it was really in regards to this one conversation. I'm sitting in the living room of a pastor friend of mine here in Miami, and honestly, I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life. And no pressure, though. It's good. But my friend said to me, he says, hey, Jeff, do you know the average church in America is 78 people? And it was funny. I remember kind of laughing and guffawing out loud, and like sarcastic. And he's like, why are you laughing at that? And I was like, well, it just sounds like bad leadership. I mean, we've got all this power, we've got all this message, we've got all of this stuff. But you're telling me right now that the average church can only gather 78 people? 80% of the churches are under 200 in size. Man, it sounds like it's a giant waste of space and a giant waste of time. And I remember my pastor friend looking at me and saying, well, Jeff, what if that's because that's the size that God wanted it to be? What can you do in a small church that you can't do in a mega giga multi? And all of a sudden, this relational aspects and the disciple making and getting onto that one-on-one relationship where you're able to help people better understand the scripture instead of trying to mass feed out. Really, it changed the perspective. And if we could do that in micro churches, if we can do that in digital space, all of a sudden we're reaching different types of people. Now, the big buildings will still be around. Like, I don't want to belabor that, but to say that that's the only way to reach people now mid post COVID, no, because there are people that won't go anywhere near that building, and so we need to be thinking different. By the way, Gallup. 72% in 1999, 72% of people were involved at some level in church. Today, for the first time, and that's not even Christian church. That's Christian, that's mosque, that's Jewish. 72% in 1999. Today, 2021, 47%.
Wow.
Over the past 20 years, we've lost 25%. And once again, I'm not even just talking Christians. There's others involved in that. So for us, the church, to say, hey, February 2020 was awesome. Let's just go back to that. Guess what? We had previously lost, 18-20% at that point over the past 20 years. So we've been failing for a while.
Yeah.
We have to do something different now.
Well, and I love this because part of the things that comes to mind while you guys were sharing is, again, you think back about the newspaper industry. Back in the day, the newspaper industry was primary. Their subscribers were tons. I was a Washington Post mail carrier. I was throwing out tons of newspapers every single day. And then digital happened and it started shifting and started changing. The newspapers that shifted and changed to digital, even just a little bit, were the ones that survived. But there was other ones. There was ones, I know there was some in San Francisco, some in Denver. There were ones all over that did not make the switch from paper to digital, and they failed. And they ended up going bankrupt or falling through. I think about my experience working with Young Life, great organization. And I remember being trained with Young Life, and you were trained in thinking about the key kid. If you could just get the key kid back in the 60s and 70s, if you could get the football, the team captain, the football team, and the team captain, the cheerleading squad, you're going to get a ton of kids at your Young Life club. Well, over the years, it changed. And now there's not just one key kid. There's multiple key kids. There's a key kid in this area, a key kid in that area, and it makes me think about digital. Again, sure, there's going to be people that want to come to in-person services, but there's going to be a lot of people that doesn't relate to. So we have to be able to change our methods and change our ability to reach them by doing different things, which is all digital.
That's good.
Angela, so as you got started with your digital only church, what was it that you needed to do to get started? Like, how did you get started? Who was your target audience of sorts? Like, if you're trying to encourage someone today and starting a digital only church, what were some of the things that you did to get started?
Well, first you have to know your why. I think I explained our why for sure. Just my passion for people that were outside the walls of the church that didn't feel like they fit. That was my who, and people that didn't have a spiritual home. I think God is pursuing every single person on earth. And so we need to be in their space and be able to answer their questions. And then we had to talk about, well, where are we going to be? That's going to look different for everybody, whether it's VR church or Clubhouse now. A lot of churches are going live on Clubhouse, which is the new platform, or Marco Polo, or Facebook or Instagram. You have to find where your people are and then go there. And so those were kind of the ways that we got started. We did a lot of experimenting. And I would say if what you're doing right now isn't working, try something else. The question that I would also I have new church planners or people that are interested in digital planning do when I'm coaching is write down your ecclesiastical minimum of what is the church. And I think then we separate our experience of what church is and what actually God is calling us to do. And that can make it easier. Also asking the question, can you gather without it being the church? Well, absolutely. And right now in digital space, I would say the expression of that is if you stream your service and never follow up on anybody, that is gathering without being the church.
Jeff,
At
what would
that
you add
point,
to
you're
that?
just sorry. At that point, man, you're creating content to consume, but you're not relationally connecting. I love that idea of creating. It's a bad term. At least I feel bad when I say it. That minimally ecclesiology of okay,
Mm-hmm.
what's that core base level
Mm-hmm.
of what you're going to make a church, and what seems to be the general consensus in conversations with people that are actually open to those conversations. It's some level, and Intentional Churches has talked about this with their gospel engine. It's the Great Commission engine, excuse me. It's the large gathering. It's the small group, and at some level, you're getting people on mission. What that mission looks like is
Mm-hmm.
obviously up for definition, but those are really the three components. Yes, there's baptism. Yes, there's communion. Yes, there's all
Mm-hmm.
sorts. There's giving. There's all sorts of other things. Meetings people's needs. Go hang out in Acts 2. I mean, I literally just
Mm-hmm.
walked away from a meeting with some globally known organizations talking about digital church, and I said, "Hey, what's your ecclesiology?" And they said, basically, we're doing Acts 2:46 or 42 to 47. Whatever that church is defined in those scriptures, that's what we're trying to do with digital church. It just looks different. But the end game, and Angela, I would love your take on this. I got a bunch of giga church, mega church, multi-site churches, current church plants, digital churches. Hey, what's the key component for you to be successful in digital space? And every one of them to the T came to this conclusion. We want to get one-on-one as quickly as possible with an individual. We want to be able to have a face-to-face conversation, because if we can have that level of conversation digitally, that's going to allow us to build a relationship that's going to be helpful long run. Angela, did you see that out of PCL?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we wouldn't be successful if it wasn't for our drive to follow up with people, to build one-on-one relationships with them. Now, face-to-face, meaning like if I was Zooming with someone, most of our face-to-face is a profile picture. But that doesn't mean that we don't do other face-to-face options for people. But I don't honestly see that as being it's not my number one goal is like this face to face anymore, because I've seen the value of discipling people every day and equipping them for service without this type of, like right now we're on Zoom, podcasters can't see that, but we're on Zoom, we see each other's faces. Um, would it be, I don't think it's any less meaningful if we were just hearing each other's voice. So the one-on-one follow-up is very important, and you need a big team to do that. So at Pursuit, like 19,000 people isn't a lot as far as social media goes, but we decided years ago that we needed to go deeper, not wider. This is not about getting a large following on our Facebook page. This is about discipling people and building relationships, and that takes time and it takes energy, and so that's where our focus is to grow our roots deeper.
So I like this, because that was going to be my next question. I asked about discipleship, digital discipleship.
Mm-hmm.
What are you specifically doing with digital discipleship there for you?
Mm-hmm. So for us, when someone comes to our page, we connect with them through private messenger, and you can do that on Facebook. It's wonderful. And we just get to know them. Where do you live? How did you find us? Do you have a local church that you go to? People will tell you their stories, and just listen and answer their questions, and then find out what they need. Are they interested in one of our prayer groups? Are they interested in joining? We use the Bible app a lot for Bible studies. So we have multiple, waving. You can't see Tom waving, but he is. He's like, yes, because there's so many options there to meet people's needs. I know Stephen Fogg, and I've quoted him quite often, says people don't want to see your live stream. They want you to answer their questions. And so if we can meet someone where they're at and get them plugged in, it's amazing. And I give you an example. Cheryl, who has come, she was introduced to our church. She had COVID. and someone posted on and tagged her in our prayer room, which has over 700 people, but tagged her and said, could you please pray for my friend Cheryl? She has COVID. So because of the tag, I was able to reach out to her and say, just following up to make sure you're okay. Well, it turns out that Cheryl is, she's not only has COVID, she's homeless, she's Black, she's a widow, she's disabled, and Cheryl is living in Minneapolis during the George Floyd trial. And so this is really an impactful time for her, but she is completely plugged in to we have messenger small groups as well. And so she's able to put an audio recording, or if she wants to do a video recording, she can, or she can connect with someone. These groups are about, I think our smallest is 14 up to 20. And so that is just how kind of an example of one-on-one works, is following up with someone, finding out what their needs are, finding out how we could plug them in, and then just building a relationship with them. To be intentional, and it does take time, and you have to be in it for the long haul. So you can't just acknowledge someone one time and then move on. That's not what this is about.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I love the Bible YouVersion app, because you're right. There's teen studies, there's adult studies, there's mom studies, there's dad studies, there's love stories, there's friendship stories. There's so many different studies you can do that I think is fantastic, and I love using that. And I've actually used that when people have joined our study. One thing that I've done with discipleship is the ones that I see that comment a lot and share a lot, I invite them into another private group of mine that I use on WhatsApp. And I invite them to be almost like digital discipleship and digital missionaries. So I try to get them to think, okay, how can I be sharing about the love of Jesus, taking another step of faith, not just doing a Bible study now, but then thinking about that digital missionary mindset. And I've had good response with that. And it's been really cool to find out that kind of stuff. Jeff, what would you add?
Angela's an incredible individual, and we should all listen to what she's doing, what she's saying. If we're not, when we look at digital, it's so easy, and even digital ministry. And I know, Tom, we talk a lot about digital ministry on here and through digital boot camp and all that. It's very easy to look at digital as, hey, I'm trying to get my message heard around the world. I'm trying to reach 1 billion people. I want to see people get baptized in Ethiopia. 1995, Billy Graham did that. One message heard around the world. One sermon, literally 1 billion people, 20% of the world's population heard Billy Graham speak. His message was bounced off of a bunch of satellites, translated in real time, multiple continents, multiple countries. Like 1 billion people literally heard Billy preach. That was 25 years ago. Technology doesn't. Its strength isn't the billion. Its strength is that intimate relationship. Its strength is connecting 3 people together in a conversation from Miami to Washington, D.C. to Washington State. And so how we do that and how we use that tool is the win. And it's so easy to look at it like a digital-only expression of church and to say, oh, well, that's that's cold, that's distant, you're not really in real community. Yeah, we are. You don't really know those people. Yeah, we do. It really depends upon how the user is going to use the tool. It can be used ineffectively to try to get 1 billion people to buy into your concept, or it can be used to build relationships with individuals, either face-to-face or text messaging or WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or Discord or Slack. And oh my gosh, there's so many different tools. And the tool can flex big, or the tool can flex very, hyper cut, very small in size. It really just depends upon how you're going to use that tool. But to say that the tool can't, or even to say that God can't use the tool, I think that's lazy thinking. I think that's grounded in what used to be, And I'm not even sure it was what it used to be. Like, I can remember having some of those intimate conversations 20 years ago as I was teaching a Bible study with 75 people around the planet in the year 2000. We went through the book of James. There were 3 people from United Arab Emirates. I don't even know where UAE is right now. I could not pick it out on a map today. But there were 3 guys who were going through this Bible study with us 20 years ago. And so we had those relationships, we had those connections, we had those opportunities to help people grow closer to God, utilizing technology before Facebook, before MySpace, and before smartphones and webcams. So to say that God can't use this today, yeah, I don't buy into it. We're seeing too many successes like Angela and others to say God's not. It's really church. We need to be praying about how we're joining in this innovation, just looking and seeing where God is moving and trying to see if we're part of it. It's not that God can't. It's God is. Are you going to be a part of it, or are you going to ignore it? And there's only so long you can ignore this.
It's the whole Blackaby experiencing God stuff,
Amen.
I mean, you got, where is God moving? And, God is using this time for us to minister to people, and they may not come back to our service, but that doesn't mean that they're not experiencing Jesus in some way. And so by us doing this is really important. Okay, so I told you guys I would only take about 20 to 30 minutes of your time, and we are over that time, and I want to be honoring of your time. So as we kind of wrap up here, I do want to give you guys a final opportunity to just share something that maybe I didn't ask you that you would love to share about digital only and the effectiveness there, or the strategy behind it. So why don't we share about that just for a few minutes? Whoever
Angela, you
wants.
go first.
It's weird doing 2 people, like interviewing 2 people, because you never know who's going to step in first. So I'm learning some good podcasting lessons here. So Angela, go ahead.
I think I would just encourage anyone who is exploring digital ministry to listen to the Holy Spirit's voice of who he's calling you to, because I know that God is raising up people, not just for digital only, but for other expressions of church. And we need that if we're going to reach the 75% of people that will not go to an in-person building, that don't consider themselves practicing Christians anymore. We need people in the workplace. We need people that really are doing exactly what you said, Tom, is seeing where God's at work and going there. And so God, if you're that person, God has anointed you. He's raised you up for this specific time in history. Don't doubt that. And also connect with networks of people that are, and learn from what they're doing, and see, you'll get a greater idea of what you're supposed to do by learning from others. And when I started, that's what I did, is I looked for anybody who was already doing digital, and just messaged them and asked them, how are they doing it? What are they doing? And so building those peer networks is really important. And you being in this group is one of those peer networks, listening and learning from each of you. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. One thing I've discovered a lot about this network, the online ministry network, is that everyone's so open to share experiences and encourage you and spur you on. It's been a very encouraging thing for me, as I still feel like I'm new at this. So I would strongly affirm what you just said, Angela. Jeff, what would you add on?
Oh yeah, always something. So if you're interested in planting, well, first off, there's tons of resources. Tom does great here with YM Sidekick. Digital Boot Camp is phenomenal on Facebook. I know he talks about it. We've got a bunch of free resources over at thechurch.digital, and would love to, make that available. Podcasts, blogs, video streams, Facebook, whatever. Let me just go check it out if you're an established church trying to understand digital, or if you're interested in planning a digital church. And really, that's the second piece of this. Like, we Stadia, we're jacked up excited to do crazy things like planting digital churches. We're working with planters right now that want to plant, or that are in the process of planting churches in Facebook and Twitch, micro locations that are hyper located into areas utilizing digital technology, virtual reality. We're training disciple making practices for people that are planning churches in video games. Black Desert Online, Final Fantasy 14. Like, so, hey, these are crazy ideas. Are you serious? Yeah. We're serious. Let's do this. As a matter of fact, Angela Craig doesn't know this, but I'm going to ask her to jump in one of these cohorts. I've actually got 3 female digital church planners, and like, Angela, I want you to come be part of this cohort where we're going to be leading and training digital church planners. We'll work out the details later, and she'll probably tell me no, but that's fine. Once again, it's this idea of sharing resources and connecting. I'm big on that, and so rather than doing something alone, especially when you're crazy, but you're right, it's torture because no one else around you believes what you're thinking. And that's when you second guess yourself. That's when you second guess God. And all of a sudden you're alone and isolated. If you're thinking crazy like this, connect up with other crazy people. Now, make sure the crazy is God based. Like, I don't go like, out of left field here. But
Ozzy Osbourne.
get connected. Get connected with people who believe. Start reading resources of people who see the world like you do. I just this past week, I've been having crazy ideas in my head about some strategy, something, and trying to figure out how the pieces would work together. And I had a conversation with a guy, and he's like, "Oh, there's a book on that." Really? What's the book? And I get this book. It's called Multi-Church. You can Amazon it, look it up. And I'm reading this book, and I'm like, this is exactly the stuff that's been in my head for 5 years. I'm glad I'm not the only one. And with that comes comfort, because now it's like, it is possible. I can do some of this stuff. I have the wisdom of others who is confirming some of the things that are going on even within my own head. And so going back to experiencing God, you're seeing how God is speaking through others around you. It's one of those ways that we see God move. All the way back in 1976, Henry Blackaby was a genius. Yes. 50 years ago, man, 40, 44, whatever it was. And so that's the heart of this. Find ways to connect with others and see where God's moving. Help them in that journey. Work together towards this and find ways to partner. Don't isolate. Technology is going to isolate you anyway. Find ways to connect where possible.
Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff is so right. If I could piggyback on that, is one of the things I'm hearing from our church planters is, I can't seem to convince anyone around me in my denomination or my church, my local church that I'm serving at, that I should do this, whatever this is that God's called you to. And I'm with Jeff, is that you can't wait for them to give you approval, because if I would have done that, there never would be 19,000 people at Pursuit. And so, because our denomination still is not moving forward to approve digital churches. So if I would have waited, I would not have been obedient to God. And obedience is freedom. So I definitely just go for it. Connect with us if you need encouragement and help.
Yeah, because if you don't respond to that, what the Lord is doing, it's you're basically acting in disobedience to God. One quick question, Jeff. Where do people find out about your cohorts? Do they go to theChurch.digital, or is it the Stadia one?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, theChurch.digital can get you there, theChurch.digital/planting, or you can go to stadiachurchplanting.org/digital, DIGITAL, and would love to have some conversations to figure out the right cohort. I mean, literally probably 20, 25 people at this point. And you're like, that doesn't seem like a lot of people. That's a ton of people that are thinking different towards it. And so love the fact that people are being brave here and pioneering in this space. You know, not to oversell this, but it's almost like it's like the second Reformation here. We have an opportunity to do something in a different way to impact the different people. And we just need some people to step up and realize, hey, like this old method is okay, maybe it's good, but there's a way to do something different. And if there's one thing we're seeing, different ways reach different people. Newness begets growth. And so take a chance, do something different, and reach a different type of person.
That's awesome. That's great encouragement. Angela, before I let you go, I know you have a blog and you write about this stuff a lot. Share with people how they can connect with you with your blog and then some social platforms. Hopefully you utilize Twitter as much as Jeff and I do, but some people aren't like that. So talk to us.
I'm actually awful at Twitter because I spend so much time on Facebook. So you can connect with me personally on Facebook and Angela Craig. And also, I wrote a book when COVID hit. It's really short. It's called Online Jesus. It tells our story and it's just a simple guide to building community, discipling, and caring for people online. And you can go to the website for that you can get it on Amazon. It's like $4, Kindle or something. But you can also go to my website and it's onlinejesus.info. And we also have a Facebook group. It's small and we do currently we're interviewing people that start pioneers on Mondays, and I'm trying to do things that Jeff is not doing so that we can complement each other because he's an incredible partner in ministry. So those are the places that you can find me.
That's great. Well, I will include all your all's links in my show notes, and so people can just easily click on them and go to them. So Jeff and Angela, it was fantastic having you on. I really appreciate you all taking time to spend with me today.
It was an honor, Tom. Thank you.
Love it.
All right, so there you have it, my conversation with Angela and Jeff. This was definitely one of the longest podcast episodes I've ever had, but it's been a great one because they've got so much knowledge. So if you're not already following Jeff and Angela, definitely go into the show notes and click on their links so you can follow them and get all their content. They've got so much valuable resources available on their sites and just connecting with them on social media. So I would strongly recommend you to do that. But what I'm curious about right now is what stood out to you, what encouraged you, what challenged you, what discouraged you about starting an online-only church, and what other questions do you have about it? Definitely share them with me. You can go to Twitter @TAPounder, highlight me, tag me, and so we can keep this conversation going on. But I would love to hear what you're thinking about in regards to starting a digital-only church. What does it look like for you, and what questions do you have? Let's keep this conversation going on right now. All right, heroes, well, that wraps it up for our episode. Again, thank you so much for staying with me. I really appreciate you doing that. If you want to subscribe to it, as I mentioned earlier, go to iTunes or Spotify and subscribe, or just go to ymsidekick.com. They've got all the information about blogs and ebooks and podcasts and vlogs. I've got tons of content for student and social media and digital strategy. So go there right now and get more information. But y'all can also go there and find out information about the Digital Bootcamp, a free Facebook group which is designed for all ministers from all different backgrounds to learn digital tools to help us expand our reach in ministry. So I would love for you to go check that out today as well. All right, heroes. Well, thanks so much for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. And until next time, have a great one.